June 4th, 1942, 10:20 a.m. in the Central Pacific. If you stop the clock right at this exact second, the Japanese Empire had already won the Battle of Midway. The Kido Butai, Japan's elite strike force of 4 massive aircraft carriers, was untouched. Their Zero fighters had just massacred wave after wave of American torpedo bombers, sending dozens of U.S. planes crashing into the sea without a single successful hit. The American fleet was desperate, uncoordinated, and running out of planes. The Japanese were invincible. But if you restart that clock and let it tick forward just 5 more minutes, the course of human history violently derails. By 10:27 a.m., 3 of those 4 invincible carriers would be burning, sinking wrecks. The backbone of the Japanese Navy would be broken forever. How does the greatest naval force on Earth lose the Second World War in exactly 300 seconds? It wasn't just American bravery, it was a logistical system error. It was the deadliest traffic jam in military history, caused by a single fatal order. To understand the annihilation, you have to look below the wooden flight decks of the Japanese carriers, into the claustrophobic steel belly of the hangars. At 7 a.m., Admiral Nagumo received word that the first strike on the American base at Midway Atoll hadn't destroyed the target. He needed to hit the island again. He ordered his reserve aircraft, which were currently loaded with ship-killing torpedoes, to be stripped and rearmed with heavy land bombs. This is a grueling, exhausting process. Mechanics had to manually winch 1,700-pound torpedoes off the planes, lower them onto carts, and winch 1,700-pound bombs back up. Then, halfway through this massive job, a chilling report arrived from a scout plane. American ships spotted. Nagumo froze. He immediately reversed his order. He commanded the mechanics to stop loading the land bombs, take them off the planes, and put the torpedoes back on. The result was pure mechanical chaos. The hangar decks of the Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu became a maze of fuel hoses, exhausted mechanics, and high explosives. Standard protocol demanded that ordnance be returned to heavily armored magazines deep in the ship, but there was no time. The mechanics simply left the massive, unsecured bombs rolling around on the hangar floor. The carriers weren't just warships anymore. They were floating powder kegs waiting for a spark. While the mechanics were sweating in the hangars, the Japanese Zero fighters were fighting for their lives outside. American torpedo bombers, flying slow and low to the water, were attacking the fleet. The Japanese Zeros, flown by the most elite pilots in the world, dropped down to sea level to intercept them. It was a slaughter. The American torpedo planes were practically wiped out, and the Japanese ships dodged every single torpedo. The Japanese crews cheered. The threat was neutralized. But by dropping down to the ocean's surface to kill the torpedo bombers, the Japanese Zeros had made a fatal tactical error. They left the ceiling completely empty. At 10:22 a.m., Admiral Tomoe Yamaguchi, pacing the bridge of the carrier Hiryu, looked skyward. What he saw was a nightmare. Dropping out of the clouds, completely unopposed by enemy fighters, were 3 squadrons of U.S. Navy SBD Dauntless dive bombers. They had been searching the empty ocean for hours, running on fumes, and had found the Japanese fleet purely by following the wake of a lone destroyer. They pushed their noses down into a near-vertical dive. Because the Japanese carriers had their flight decks packed with fully fueled aircraft waiting to launch, and their hangars littered with those unsecured bombs from the fatal swap, it didn't take a barrage to sink them. It only took a spark. The Kaga was the first to die. Multiple 1,000-pound bombs smashed through her wooden deck, igniting the fuel lines and the loose ordnance below. She erupted into a massive, unstoppable inferno. Seconds later, the Soryu took 3 direct hits. The blast pressure folded the steel flight deck back like a tin can. Then came the flagship, the Akagi. Only 3 American bombers attacked her. 2 missed. But the third dropped a single bomb dead center. It punched through the deck and detonated right in the middle of the crowded hangar. A terrifying chain reaction of exploding torpedoes and aviation fuel ripped the heart out of the ship. 10:22 to 10:27 a.m. In exactly 5 minutes, the pride of the Imperial Japanese Navy was erased. But the Battle of Midway wasn't over. Because the dive bombers had missed 1 ship, The Hiryu, commanded by Admiral Yamaguchi, was sailing under a cloud patch and escaped the 5-minute massacre. Surrounded by the burning wreckage of his sister ships, Yamaguchi didn't run. He rallied his men and ordered an immediate counterattack against the American carrier Yorktown. This is where the story shifts from logistical horror to desperate human sacrifice. After an initial wave of dive bombers crippled the Yorktown, Yamaguchi ordered a second strike, led by Lieutenant Joichi Tomonaga. Tomonaga's torpedo bomber had been badly damaged in the morning raid. The left-wing tank was punctured. The engineers warned him that he only had enough fuel to reach the Americans. He did not have enough fuel to fly back. Tomonaga didn't care. "I can make it on one tank," he insisted. He knew he was flying a suicide mission before the word kamikaze had even entered the naval dictionary. At 1:30 p.m., Tomonaga found the Yorktown. As he commenced his torpedo run, his plane was ripped apart by American anti-aircraft fire and burst into flames. Yet, he held his plane steady, riding the fireball just long enough to drop his torpedo perfectly before crashing into the sea. His squad scored 2 devastating hits, knocking the Yorktown out of the war. Yamaguchi believed he had leveled the playing field, but American codebreakers and scouts were one step ahead. At 5 p.m., a final wave of 24 American dive bombers found the Hiryu. 4 bombs shattered her forward flight deck, plunging the ship into a raging firestorm. By nightfall, the last of the 4 great carriers was a drifting, dead hulk. Admiral Yamaguchi, adhering to the ancient samurai code, tied himself to the ship's bridge and went down with his vessel. The Battle of Midway is often remembered as a miracle of American intelligence and bravery, and it was. But it was also a warning about the physics of war. Japan didn't lose 4 carriers because their ships were weak, or because their pilots lacked skill. They lost because of a 30-minute delay and a cluttered hallway. They lost because, in the brutal arithmetic of naval warfare, you can do everything right for a decade and lose your entire empire in exactly 5 minutes. If the story of the fatal swap changed how you see the Battle of Midway, hit that like button. Every like tells the algorithm that the gritty, unpolished history of these crews deserves to be remembered. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive into the archives. What do you think if Admiral Nagumo had launched his planes immediately instead of swapping the bombs? Would Japan have won the war in the Pacific? Let us know in the comments below.